Okay, well, right now you're looking at the Eugene team. The Eugene, Oregon team of researchers investigating the papers of Thomas Large. So let's do a quick intro to each person that you see on screen, and then we'll kind of go from there. Let's start in the lower right. That's Jody. Jody, where do you live, and what was your profession if you were working for all those years?
I live in Eugene, and I worked for the telephone company when it was U.S. West, and I started with Pacific Northwest Bell. And I was started out as an operator, and then I ended up being a supervisor for about 30 years. And
Excellent.
I ran team. I was a first-line supervisor, and I ran teams from size 3 up to 150.
Oh, my, okay.
So when I go into waiting rooms, I try and organize them. and when I show up at the library, and these people that you've invited to come and volunteer, and they show up going, I like to organize them. And they have been very friendly and nice and willing to listen to me say, oh, that sounds good, Jody. I can do that. And I go, good.
Well, very good. Well, yes, you are definitely the captain of the Eugene team, whether you want to be designated that or not. So we're coming back to you, and I want to hear your story from start to finish in just a second. But how about to the upper right? This is Emily Moore. What's your role here, Emily?
Hi, so I am the Instruction and Outreach Archivist at Special Collections and University Archives at UL Libraries. So I get the great pleasure of working with our collections and also enabling our researchers to access our materials.
Thank you for being here. So you're right on the campus of the University of Oregon?
I am not right now, work from home today, but
Okay.
Generally, yep, we are in the night library on UL campus. It's a beautiful place to get to work.
Excellent. Let's skip over to the other side of me. Lucy, where do you live, and what is your profession?
Well, I live in Eugene, and I am a registered nurse. So that I think I have held a lot of roles within the nursing profession.
Yes.
But I have a background in ER and intensive care. Being a faculty at the college level. So that's, and my biggest passion, of course, is geology.
Oh my gosh. Okay. A nurse with a passion for geology. That sounds like a dream right there. So thank you, Lucy. We're going to get more from you in a second. And finally, John, you are not living in Eugene. Where are you right now? And what is your line of work, or was?
Right now, I'm at home, which is in Markham, Oregon, which is a slow spot in the road between Molalla and Silverton, south of Portland. It's about roughly an hour and a half, 2 hours from Eugene.
Okay.
I am now retired from my systems engineering profession, which I started back in 1983. You and I actually graduated about the same time, and I was doing that for 30 years. I'm retired from that job, but my wife and I raise dairy goats here. We've got a commercial dairy goat herd, commercial dairy, as well as a breeding herd for dairy goats, and that's what keeps me busy.
Great. Okay, well, thank you. Here's my plan. It's a loose plan, you guys, but we're meeting each other for the first time. At least I'm meeting all of you for the first time right now. So in real time, let's say I want to start with the story of, well, let's just do it. I'm not talking about it. Let's just do it. It was over Christmas break. I was taking a brief break from the Ice Age Floods A to Z live stream series, but I couldn't stop. So the house is full of relatives, and I would still sneak away occasionally to the office and do a few things in the morning, especially. And one day, I forget the date, but it was about December 21st probably, I got on here and I talked to the viewers and I said, hey, this is a recorded video, but is anybody willing to go to the campus of the University of Oregon? Because I think I've heard from a number of people that there's a collection of papers by Thomas Large, a Lewis and Clark High School science teacher in Spokane, Washington. God knows why they're in Eugene, but they are. Is anybody willing to go onto the campus and try to figure out where those papers are and if we can access them at all? So Jody, I think you even beat me to the punch with that. Isn't that the first part of the story, that you had this moment that you were going to go try to find this collection even without me prompting you?
Yeah, I had already ordered the boxes out. Sharon Seal back in June, and she referred to that in her interview, is that she got intrigued with Thomas Large, and she had mentioned, and you had mentioned, that he seemed to be important to the story of the Ice Age floods, and you mentioned it before. And so when Sharon said, "Oh, they're at the University of Oregon, and we're starting the A to Z," and I'm going down to the Porcelain Palace in the middle of the night, and I go, I bet you that maybe there might be some stuff in there. And Nick doesn't know. Nobody knows. So over Christmas break, after the students are gone, when I can find parking, then I will go down to the University of Oregon Library and I will figure out how to do that. And so I had gone ahead and done that. And then you put out the call, and I wasn't quite sure about it doing it. And we had people started showing up. And Chris showed up, and he was there, but the first day I was in there, and he was showing me what I needed to do and all that kind of stuff. So he said that he is not technical. He's even less of a tech person than I am. And he said, "This is all I can do." I said, "Well, come back and read them and enjoy them, So he says he didn't do much, and he got me straightened out and helped me out. And the boxes came in, and when I first showed up to get them, the young lady that was going to go get the boxes and take them into the research room said, "The box isn't here." I said, "Excuse me?" And so she went in and talked to the folks that run it, because she's just a work-study person. And they said, "Somebody's already in there looking at them." And that's how the team formed, as people came in to look at the boxes, and I happened to be there. I tried to be there from 10 to 1 or 11 to 1, depending. And then we would talk about what needed to be done, and I kept kind of track on what had been done so that you didn't get a bunch of people sending you Bretz papers, that you would do the whole thing. And the thing I'm very proud about is that we managed to get all of the 4 boxes gone through, and it was a real big. My suggestion was, if it said geology on it, make a picture. So that's why you ended up with all this information, Nick. Is that's what we did. We did no analysis, none of that, and they just took pictures for you. And then John went ahead and has done more research with Hobbs, but that's the story, and I'm sticking to it.
Well, that's beautiful. Let's just do a little bit more with this, because this seems to be, I don't know, you can correct me, Emily, but this is pretty unique, isn't it? People are just like physically showing up in your collections office or library or something, and were you or the staff people like, what's going on? Like, everybody's showing up, they don't even know each other, and they're checking out boxes. Can you speak to just kind of your broad scene there, Emily, and then how this all kind of came to be in the last week of December?
Absolutely. So it's funny, on our end, actually, one of my colleagues, Austin, who is our collections manager, so he's in charge of all of the background spaces that happen. He runs all of that. So he actually was sent one of your videos from, I think, his sister-in-law. So we had this moment as a team of being like, oh, I think that we're going to need to be anticipating a bunch of requests for Thomas Large. So it really is a team effort at SCUA. So we have Austin, who's in charge of the behind the scenes. And then we have my colleague, Lauren, who's our reference specialist. So she's the one who really gets all of the researchers up and running. So it was all of us coming together. And then, as Jody mentioned, we have just an army of amazing student workers who do all of the physical polling for us. So they also felt that ripple effect start to come through. And I mean, it was just a blast on our end to be able to see all of these different researchers come through, folks who wouldn't necessarily have been in our spaces before, and to see that really organic teamwork come out of your guys' community was really fun to see.
Oh, that's really cool. Lucy, so your particular slant on the story, so I just imagine that I'm doing this video, I'm saying, is anybody willing to go in? And then I remember, please correct me, but I remember getting individual emails, maybe from you, maybe from John, maybe from others, saying, well, I can help. Maybe I'll go in on Tuesday. And I think I was literally forwarding each of those individual emails to Jody and hoping that Jody could kind of coordinate. Does that sound familiar, Lucy, from how you got involved?
Yes, yes. I mean, I heard you saying that in one of the chats, and I said, well, I'm here, and you cannot rely that somebody else is going to go show up. So I said, I have to make sure this is done.
Yeah.
So I requested the materials. I don't know if it went through or not, the request. And then I went
Oh.
ahead and I enlisted my granddaughter, Jasmine, as you know, Jasmine, we're gonna have to take really good pictures of this. So um, I'm gonna hold a paper, and you have to take really good pictures. And so they had to be clear, and it has to be fast because I was doing at lunchtime. I was
Oh.
like between she will go pick me up from work, and then we will go. So we have a few minutes, so we're like, okay, we have to get this done. So that's when the first time I went there, it was so beautiful to meet Jody. I just, I enjoy that so much to say, that I met somebody that had the same interest in geology, like me, because you really don't meet this kind of community. So it was really nice to meet her and the staff too. They had everything ready. So I was kind of surprised. I'm like, oh my God, it is here. And that's how we got together. So then Jody comes in, and Jody, you're the organizer. So she's the one that, okay, we're going to do it like this.
Yeah.
Just
Me?
evolve from there.
Yeah. Yeah. Jody's like, okay, all right. Yeah. Lucy, over there. Yeah. John, over there. Come on. We got to go. We got to go.
I did
No.
not do that. What I
No.
asked, Lucy had specific things she wanted to copy. And I
Good.
made sure, okay, Lucy, we'll make sure you get to do that. And
Yeah.
some of them didn't care. And some of them, said, and like with John, I said, John, I know that this is already copied and you came in. But this guy Hobbs is fighting with Bretz and
Right.
Large. So maybe you'd be interested in that. And guess what? He was.
Well, yeah, we're saving John for the second half of this, where John has some slides he wants to share, and he does want to get into the details.
Yeah.
But let's go briefly to you right now, John. Do you have a similar story? Do you remember emailing me, and then I forwarded it to Jody, and then you guys connected somehow physically on campus? Is that how that worked, John?
Well, Jody didn't mention it. Well, she did mention that, of course, when she came in to find that box and found out, oh, it's already been checked out. Someone's already got it in the reading room. Well, that was me.
Okay.
I had not met Jody. But I had just gone down to the U of O to find out about how to get access to these.
Oh.
And, I was ready to start checking things out because I had actually gone online. And I will show briefly here the online access, the portal that
Good.
does show the Thomas Large collection and some of the contents. Emily, you might want to speak to some of that too for other people that are just interested in archives in general, because I imagine your method of access may be similar to other collections, of which there are several, as we've started to find out, not just the Large collection, but there's the Bretz collection. There's a Flint collection in 2 different places.
What?
Yeah, there's a Flint collection out there. I don't remember which. It might be at Yale, but I think there's actually, I think there's a couple of collections out there.
Well, good. Yeah, Emily, let's try that right now. Why not? So can you generally, I guess you can just speak for your collection, but maybe generally as well, special collections on other university campuses. Is it as secretive as I think it is? Are you guys just dying to have people, you're like thrilled if somebody walks in the door kind of a thing? Or there's tons of people coming in and looking at materials? Like, you can take that anywhere you want to go.
I will definitely say that it is not a secret, and we are thrilled to have people who come in and use the collections. We take our role as a library really seriously, and we are strongly in favor of people coming to use our stuff. That said, I do think that processes in the archival world can be kind of cumbersome and difficult to access, and there's certainly specific language that people use that's not very common. And then there's all of these different portals that you can find on the internet that will give you different access to different types of information. So broadly speaking, special collections is a word that we use, or a phrase that we use in the library world to just talk about like non-book or weird book stuff. So our special collections at SCUA, which is what we call ourselves, Special Collections and University Archives, our collections consist of sort of two buckets of things, where we have our rare books collection and then we have our archival collection. And our rare books collection started in the 1930s when we were gifted a huge sort of personal collection of a guy named Burgess, who was a book collector. And our archival collections really start with the university's archives, and then they grow from there. So in terms of access, everything that we have at SCUA is findable in our catalog. And I've sent all of these links to you, Nick, so please feel free to share them. So that's the first place that you want to start. And then I think what John was probably referring to was our archive space website, which is where you can access all of our finding aids. And for those who don't know or may not be familiar, finding aids are basically a table of content for an archival collection. So you'll be able to see what's in box 1, what's in folder 1. You can do a keyword search, and then you'll also get background information in terms of like biographical material, content around what's actually in the collection, that type of information.
Thank you for that. Lucy, I'm just curious, how old is your granddaughter?
She's 22.
22.
She's
Okay.
going
I
to.
remember her. She was lovely. You guys are so cute together. I love seeing you guys work together.
Thank you. And we had to arrange her school time, her work time, the part time she's doing, so that she could coincide with my lunch, and then we can go. And because it was time, you had the pressure that we wanted Unique to have it as soon as possible, or if I was going to forward that to Sharon, then that information needed to go to Sharon as soon as possible, so she had time to look at it. Was it the right information? Was legible? Did it needed to be? It wasn't missing pages. What was it?
Yeah. Well, if people are waiting for me to say thank you, I've already said thank you a million times over email, but I want to do it again, like all 4 of you, and maybe there's a few others that are not with us today.
Yes, Don.
Yeah.
There is Don Hansen also came in. He has hearing problems, and he came in and he put in his 3 or 4 hours and said, "I got other life to do." So,
Well, Jody, at some point, I think you emailed me the total number of hours with everybody together. Do you remember a ballpark number for what we're talking about?
yeah, can you tell I'm an old manager? It was about 50 hours.
Oh my God. 50 hours.
50 hours of people. That is not including travel. That is not any of that. So yeah, about 50 hours over about 2 weeks. And once again, I'm very proud that we got through all 4 boxes, Nick. We got to the end.
Well, that is, I'm starting to feel bad right now, because did we do enough with Thomas Large? I mean, we're gonna make up for a little bit of that today, but yeah, there was obviously just a finite number of letters. Go ahead, Jody.
I think you did do enough. I was very impressed because I got to see most of the stuff, and I rummaged around when I finished and that kind of stuff. And I've been very impressed with the way that you've distilled and taken parts and gotten to the important parts. There is one part that, is this the time that you want to hear with one guy you missed?
Sure.
Okay, well, one guy you missed was who Rocky is, and you kept asking who Rocky is. And Rocky is listed as a co-writer on his very first paper that I know of, that's done in September of 22, on the inland drainage and Cordillera and glaciation. And he and W.A. Rocky wrote it together. He gives it to both of them. Rocky goes on to be he's a geographer, not a geologist. Okay. And he goes on to become he's listed as the state of Oregon geographer, and his papers reside at PSU.
Oh, wow.
And there's nothing in this archive other than Large mentioning him. There's nothing from him. And so it'd be interesting to see what Rocky's might say if he mentions Large or not. But they co-wrote that very first paper in September of 22 about the glaciation.
Interesting. Well, yeah, I can just now imagine you sitting there, Jody, and I'm episode after episode like, I really need to figure out who Rocky is. You're like, open your email. I already sent you a bunch of stuff. Like, what do you?
Only 365 pages, Nick. I don't know why you didn't pick up on that guy who's mentioned maybe 3 times in those 365 pages.
Well, that was a fun thing. If I open my email and I'm like, there's 75 emails today from Jody. I'm like, oh, Jody's punching in again from the library. I mean, it was just so great to get all of that.
Well, if you don't want emails, I figured out how to do one of these, and so I could send you one of those.
There you go. Good. Well, I think we're about to go to John's slides, but before we do that, can we pause and does anybody else have something to add kind of generally on this kind of scope of the whole thing? Like, is parking an issue, Emily? If somebody it's available to non-students? Maybe we should clarify that.
It is, yeah, thank you. So just the functionally part of things, parking can be an issue, definitely. The good news is that the night library is right on the west edge of campus.
Yeah.
So there is street parking available there, but it just depends on the time of year. It can be very difficult, for example, when the Olympic trials are happening, that sort of thing. So it gets tricky, definitely. But our repository is open to the public. We encourage folks from all walks of life to come and work with our collections. So please come fight the parking, come and find us.
Good.
Emily, I think it might be worth mentioning that there is a process, though, because it's not like you can just waltz on in there, tell you I'm looking for this, and then have them trot it out. It takes some time to actually get some of the materials into the reading room.
It does. And thank you, John, for bringing that up. So what our collection is what's called a non-circulating collection, which means that you can't check it out. You have to use the stuff on site with us. And while our reading room is open Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., we can't do what's called page on demand, which means that we can't just deliver materials right when people ask them if they come in and they ask for something from the desk. And the reason for that is, we have multiple reasons. One of them is that not all of our collections actually live at the library. We have offsite storage. So sometimes we need time to go and get them from elsewhere. And then also some of our materials live in a literal vault that is open twice a week. So we can only page things on those specific days. So we do ask that folks who request materials that they give us 5 business days before they come into the reading room to use them. And people get updates from the catalog in their email to let them know sort of what the stage of their request is at. And then in addition to that, I also have a link that I can share that gives information about how to register as a researcher in our reading room, because again, students and faculty have automatic access, but then we also offer access to folks who hold what's called an Oregon card. And then there's another way to register in addition to that as well. So I will share that link because there's sort of different ways that you can register as a user.
Terrific. Thank you. I should know the answer to this, but I don't. I'll just throw it out to anybody. Thomas Large never lived in Eugene, Oregon. Why are his papers there? Has anybody figured that out?
I have not. As the archivist, I have not. What I can say is that when I look at the finding aid, you'll often get what's called a provenance note. And ours doesn't really say very much, but it does look like the collection was first described in 2010. So that doesn't mean that the collection arrived in 2010, but that means that's when it was processed. So it's possible that there's a whole life cycle that happens within that as well. And it's not uncommon for repositories to get collections from colleagues, coworkers, family members, that type of thing. And based off of the contents of our large collection, I wouldn't be surprised if there's other materials also living in other repositories that would together be his entire.
I see. Thank you.
Sorry, I don't remember taking the photos of it, but I know one of the first folders in the first box is an inventory. It lists a little bit of biographic materials, and it's from the original archivist that put it all together. And I'm trying to remember the dates. What I do remember, it turns out that the archive was received and started to be cataloged right about the time when the first edition of Cataclysms on the Columbia was published. I remember that because the dates were within a year or two of each other.
Huh.
Interesting.
Yeah, but that was back, oh golly, I've got the book downstairs. I forget what the pub date was. I think it was prior to 2010 though. It would have been.
Okay, well, and it might be that the 2010 was when it was made available on the internet.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When
Right.
like when the finding aid became electronic, that might be what it is as well. Which
Yeah.
is again why you have to come and look at the stuff, right?
Right.
Because like
Right.
there's all these different iterations of it that exist.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that story about when was the collection received is not online that I could find. But it is physically written down in the collection.
Well, I think we know how this works. Somebody's going to leave a comment down below 3 weeks from now, and they'll say, I'm the person that whatever, and that's great. And we'll get an answer to that. Jody.
John McDonald, which was his son-in-law, has a letter in the parts, the 365 pages I sent you, talking about how they they sent it to the U of O, and I don't know if the U of O, he tried other places or what, and he doesn't say why he picked the U of O. And maybe he went to the U of O because, like Emily said, you know, some of our alumni do, if they say, yeah, I got something that I think you'd be interested. And then his third wife, Thomas Large's third wife, said, yes, I want it to go there. So there are those letters in that 365 pages I sent you.
That's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing tonight, Jody. I'm going to go to those 365. I'm just going to go. I'm going to get a nice bottle of wine, and I'm just going to go through that. Thank you for that. I mean, it's so crazy. I feel like I know you guys. Like, this is so crazy. All of this stuff, it just feels like we've been talking forever, and we have by email. But I mean, it's hard to overstate how unique this is. And I just love the concept of you guys physically kind of meeting each other in that space and then working together. That just doesn't seem to happen that often these days. So again, terrific. If anybody's got to take off, I understand. I think we're about to do a deep dive into some specific slides with John. I don't want to discourage you, but if you it's 1:30 right now. So everybody want to stick around for another 20 minutes or so?
I'm up in John's heaven, so yes, I'll stick around.
Yeah. Full disclosure, yeah. Jody's like, I don't think so. I don't know how to do Zoom and everything. And I'm like, we need you. You're the captain of the whole thing. So Jody drove an hour and a half this morning up to John's house. So she's are you guys in the same room or spare bedroom or something?
He put me in the blue-green room.
Okay.
And that's just to make sure that our microphones work and get the Zoom echo effect going. So we solved that problem.
It's working beautifully. And John, yes, you're very strong with this technology stuff. So I think this is the moment, John. Would you mind sharing your screen? And we will be happy to listen to what you have to say. And maybe we will be shouting out a few questions here and there. All of us should feel free to interrupt John and just point out a couple of things. So please, John, the floor is yours. Thank you.
All right. Well, I've shared my screen. Are you able to see it?
Yes, we can.
Great. Okay. So before I get into my presentation, Emily had mentioned about the portal access. And here is the website, that portal itself for the Thomas Large papers. And you can see over here on the side the information that is at least online that talks about what's available in the in the collection. And this is important because, you know, as Jody found, you know, you go there and you have to check these folders or these boxes out. Mm-hmm. So without knowing, you kind of have to have something like this to go in here and find out, oh, we got 4 boxes to look through. What's in them? Well, mainly consists of largest correspondence, others, theories, manuscripts, and so forth. So we've got subject matter in here. You can see the topics that are available. And then you can go in here and talk about where the correspondence is indexed, like there's Bretz, and you can click on that, and it can tell you that's in box 1, folder 6. So there is a way of at least getting into, at least topically, what's available. Obviously, the details are not there. These are not been scanned. You can't search for internal contents. So you can really only search for some topical stuff, but it's there. It's there.
John, could there's a question I have for Emily. Is she still on?
She is.
I am. I'm here.
Okay, because I can only see Nick on my screen because I'm on my cell phone. They talked to me about how it's possible to get a digitized copy of what's in the file, and that you could somehow they contact the university and Like the Bretz letters, if that's all you wanted, you can ask for a digitized copy. And they told me it was like 6 weeks. They send it out to a place and they digitize it, and then you get it back. Emily, could you talk to that? Because that way people don't have to. And I do know there's a cost to it, but for some people, it's cheaper than going to Eugene.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking that question, Jody. So for digitized stuff, there's really a couple of ways. One is that I do want to call out, we have a portal called Oregon Digital. I'll share this link with Nick later. And Oregon Digital is where our digitized stuff lives. So that's going to be books, archives, photographs, that type of thing. The caveat to that is that, of course, not everything is digitized. So that's where you go if you think something might already be digitized and available. To have stuff do what we call digitization on demand, there is a form that can be filled out on the library's website. I will also I'll share this link as well. Digitization actually happens outside of our unit. There's a whole digital unit at UO Libraries. And yeah, the quick and the dirty is that it can take up to 6 weeks to do. And it's just a flat fee of $50 a folder, which is obviously not cheap. But depending on that folder might have 200 pieces of paper in it for $50, or it might have one piece of paper in it for $50. So definitely helpful to do some research ahead of time. Ask your reference librarian to maybe just check how much stuff there is in there. But that is absolutely an option for folks who are too far away to be able to come and see it in person.
Thank you.
And where is the digitized? Where are those records? Where they're online then and through the university?
So the digitization on demand that happens, say you wanted to digitize the folder from the large papers, that would just be digitized, and then those files would be sent to you, and they wouldn't necessarily go up onto Oregon Digital. But Oregon Digital is where all of the stuff that the institution has decided to digitize, that's where all of that stuff lives, and a lot of it is archival material.
Yeah, I know that somebody did request one of the boxes. I got an email that said, hey, you have no longer access. Somebody's asked for a folder out of the box, and so your access is taken away for a while. So
yeah, it gets rerouted.
Yeah, and that was fine. That was great. As more people that see this collection and want it, that's great. So, thank you, Emily.
And I think it's one of the reasons why there's a perception that it's mysterious or it's secret or so forth. It's just that we've gotten so used to so much available online.
Yes.
And textual searches and large searches that, things like what Sharon was doing. Hers was all online searches with fully digitized material. Mm-hmm. Going into archives is a different story. Yeah. It's slower. It's old school. The only thing that you're allowed inside that reading room is a pencil.
And your phone.
And your phone. and I did ask politely when I went in, can I take pictures of this stuff? And I was told yes, thank goodness. But it is a little bit more formal, but it's still available. And by the way, I brought up on here their portal in which Emily will send those links. But I want to put another name in here, another Thomas.
Oh,
Does that one look familiar?
Wow, really?
Oh, yeah.
So we have a third Condon in the collection as well.
Do you now?
We have Ellen Condon's papers too.
Okay, yeah, I know about her. Yeah, wow.
Look at this, Thomas Condon papers.
And you'll see that there's actually two collections of Thomas Condon, and that's because one is going to be his personal stuff, and then the other is going to be his work at UO. So it would be considered a university archives collection.
Yeah. So I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole today, but I just wanted to let people know, those that are interested in famous figures in Pacific Northwest geology, there it is.
Very cool. Thank you.
I will also just make a quick plug, and I can send this list to you guys as well because I don't want to monopolize the time, but I did a search through the catalog and the finding aids, and I found 5 other collections I think you might be interested in addition to the papers of the Department of Geology, the Department of Geography, and then the papers of multiple geology professors as well. So hopefully some of that will be a gold mine for you guys.
Excellent. Oh boy, can't wait.
Well, let's go back into the gold mine we've already been looking at. And what I have for folks today is a story that I found, and this was actually found on my first day looking through the archives. And to me, it was a very special story not so much from the geology that was uncovered, but just the relationships that you learn about when you start looking at these correspondence letters in these collections. And the three characters that we're going to be talking about, of course, are Thomas Large, William Hobbs, and that name folks might remember because Nick, you touched on it briefly, and of course, J. Harlan Bretz. This takes place in a time period between August and December of 1943, resulting in a paper that Thomas Large published, his last paper to be published, called Confusions over Glacial Lake Spokane. So the cast of characters, and this will be a review for some people that probably already know this, but of course we have Thomas Large, who was a teacher at Lewis and Clark High School in Spokane. William Hobbs, who was a geology professor at University of Michigan, and of course J. Harlan Bretz, geology professor at University of Chicago. Bretz and Large met in 1922, and in that same year, Large published The Glaciation of the Cordilleran Region, which he presents evidence for glacial Lake Spokane. Also in that same year, Bretz published Glacial Drainage on Columbia Plateau, where he references Large's publication that was made earlier that year. And that year, in 1922, began that long relationship between Bretz and Large, and Bretz's years of work in the channeled scablands. Now, who was William Hobbs? He taught at the University of Wisconsin from '89 to '06, and then University of Michigan from '06 to '34. He was a well-known glacial expert and explorer. It's interesting when I looked at it, he really emphasizes his field work and exploration worldwide, trips to Greenland, Europe. This is also interesting. He was an official, a fellow, or a member of no less than 20 scientific, educational, or honor organizations, and he had many benefactors. He was kind of a big cheese.
Let me add one thing, John, before we move on. That year, 1906, is significant. I'm reminding the viewers, you remember Israel Russell invited Bretz over to his house in March of 1906, and suddenly Russell dies on May 1st, 1906, and who's Russell's replacement that fall at the University of Michigan? William Hobbs. So there's a specific connection between the Bretz-Russell early days that we were talking about before Christmas. Thank you, John.
It's a small world.
Yeah, it is.
So jumping ahead to 1943, Thomas Large is now 72 years old. He'd been retired for teaching for 2 years. J. Harlan Bretz, who's 61 years old, he was still teaching at U Chicago, but it was quite a while since he was actually doing the field work and research in the scablands back in the 20s. Hobbs, age 79, he'd been retired from teaching for 9 years, but was still associated with his university, still traveling and exploring, presumably still active in his many organizations and memberships and so forth. Now, of course, we remember that Bretz's flood hypothesis had been roundly discarded in 27 at the ambush meeting. And in the 30s and 40s, other geologists were attempting to replace his hypothesis with other conventional uniformitarian interpretations. Now, during the winter of 42 and 43, and this is Hobbs writing this, saying that he heard a presentation from Bretz on the scablands and said, wow, I got to get in this. I think I know what's going on. And so in the summer of 43, Hobbs reached out to various sponsors for funding. He traveled to Eastern Washington for a month of field study, intending to publish an article in the fall of that year. And during this time, he found Large's publication on glacial Lake Spokane. So geography, I like doing maps so people know where we're talking about, not just what we're talking about. But of course, we're talking the area around Spokane. There's Ellensburg, the center of the universe, of course. And Eugene, we're down that way. We're down in this area. But the region that we're talking about in this presentation is all up here in the Spokane region, and notably not just the Spokane Valley, but south of the Spokane Valley. This area down in here, west of Coeur d'Alene, south of Spokane, becomes real interesting. And here's what that looks like. Spokane Valley through here. Here's the Cheney-Palouse channeled scablands, and a lot of the stuff that's involved in the correspondence between Large and Hobbs is in this region south of Spokane. So let's start with the correspondence. So on August 3rd, 43, Hobbs writes to Large, and he asks for a copy of Large's paper on Glacial Lake Spokane. He says, I ran across, so he writes, Large, I just ran across your paper on Lake Spokane in Pan American Geologist of 24. I'd already come across this lake with some similar boundaries to yours when just this morning I ran across your paper. Could I get a reprint, please? I've already found that a glacial lobe occupied the Scabland area, and this lake ran along the border of it instead of as you have indicated on your map. The difference, however, it's not so bad. I congratulate you on your keen work, William Hobbs. Large writes back right away and says, Dr. Hobbs, it's indeed a surprise and honor to receive from you a letter in regard to my paper. At present, I'm so far out of touch with the literature that I'm at a loss to know where your paper appeared, which you refer to the ice lobe occupying the Scabland area. Could you kindly advise me? It's actually a fairly long letter. I'm just taking some excerpts from. But he describes this Lake Spokane as originally described by me in Science of September 22nd, 1922. And this is an outcome of the paper that Jody was referring to that Rocky was involved in.
Okay.
Was it the next earliest major advance? Next earliest major advance, Nick. Which for a time at least was spoken of as the, quote, Spokane ice, and was formed of the meltwaters of the west slope of the Cordilleran system in British Columbia, Montana, Idaho, which were blocked in their directly westward flow through the Spokane Valley by ground ice crossing the valley, with its eastern margin lying against the little mountain to the northeast corner of the city and extending slightly south of west to a point on the westernmost ridge of Browns Mountain, about 7 miles to the south. Let's go back to the map and take a look at what he's talking about. So here's that glacial ice that he's talking about, the Spokane ice. We've been thinking blue, MIS 6. That's when he's talking about the next major advance. They didn't have the dating techniques that we have. They didn't know what MIS 6 is, but I believe that's what Large is referring to. Now, this is Large's definition of where that ice slope came down. Bretz has a similar definition, at least along this margin, but Bretz actually takes it off over here.
But John, this is new to me right now. If the timing of this is correct, am I hearing you right, that Large published his paper saying that it's not the youngest ice advance over Spokane before Bretz even shows up to do his field work? Is Bretz taking that older ice sheet idea directly from Large? I guess I missed that before. Is that the way you're reading this too?
Lake Spokane, as originally described by me, was of the next earliest major advance.
Wow, okay.
Now, timing-wise, Nick, this is September of 22. This is after Large and Bretz have met. And this is before Bretz publishes his 22 paper. So Large and Bretz have already met.
But Large almost presumably put in his paper for publication before he met Bretz in the field. And Bretz doesn't show up till August 1st, and you can't publish these things immediately. So
no, it's true. But this is based on this paper, this September paper. Is based on talks that he'd actually already presented this verbally. So the content of this, and as Jody said, he had already worked on this with Rocky. I don't know how long ago.
Oh, wow!
But I think it was years. And
let me interrupt. I don't know for sure, and like John says, he likes to have the data for it. But Rocky and Large were white pine blister rust searcher outers. They were both unemployed. Rocky was totally unemployed. He'd been a farmer and had lost his farm, and then Large had just started teaching school.
Right.
And they got hired on with the government, and I think it was the Department of Agriculture or whatever, to go up in the woods in the high mountains and look for blister rust on white pine trees. Because and as an aside, they're still trying to do that. Anyway, trying to control that. And that's where I think they met, is both of them were working in the Spokane area, because Large had children at home, and so he's not going to go too far. And then Rocky comes in, and they, from what I can gather, and I haven't looked specifically, W.A. Rocky wrote a book called 70 Years as a Geographer, and he lists that between 1919 and 1922. That's what he's doing. So
Yeah, this paper didn't come fully formed in the summer of 1922, Nick.
Right. This is a
Large-
big
No.
moment. This is a
Large-
big moment.
Yeah, Large had been working on this. I think there's evidence that suggests that he had already presented this verbally in Spokane well before the summer of 22. I almost wonder, again, this is my interpretation or hypothesis, I don't have anything to back this up, but I almost wonder when Large and Bretz met in the summer of 22, and Large had described to Bretz this story that he had been working on. Bretz may well have said, "Dude, you got to publish this, and I want to use this, and I can't reference you until you're published. So would you please publish?" Because as we'll come across here shortly, we'll find that Bretz writes his 22 paper, and he references Large. He references Large's paper in Bretz's 22 paper.
Thank you.
John,
Please.
John, could you send, because he's going to go to the emails or whatever, do you want to send him that paper in one of your fancy files?
I'll do that. I'll seek
That
out
way he
and
won't
send
have
it.
to leaf through like we did earlier today looking for 365 pages.
I will do that. I will do that.
Okay.
Anyway,
Is that okay, Nick?
It's great. Yeah, it's going to be a long night. I'm looking forward to it. And John, you're doing a great job. Keep it going.
Thank you. Okay, so here's this, this ice slope that we've talked about. Large, this is his interpretation of where it is. And what he's really focused on is this glacial Lake Spokane. Now, folks who watched the previous video, if they were looking really closely, they would have seen Sky Cooley put up a elevation map that shows a glacial Lake Spokane. That's different than this one. This is Large's interpretation. I think there is a modern interpretation of a glacial Lake Spokane I think is different than what Thomas Large proposed. I don't know. That's not my shtick, but I just wanted to mention that right now because I'm pretty sure this is different than what is currently thought of by those that know this stuff.
Thank you.
In any event, Large says there's this big backwater, and it turns out there's this also glacial Lake Lata that's impounded by this big old ice sheet over here. And he goes on to describe it, how these glacial lakes are defined by the divide into California Creek and the divide into Pine Creek. The outflow of this lake, Spokane, was to the southward through deep channels across the ridge, connecting Browns Mountain with Mica Peak, and into the valley of California Creek, thence to Hangman Creek. As the ice barrier extended across these valleys and onto the south, and beyond the town of Spangle, a second lake was formed, Lake Lata of Bretz. Bretz was the one who actually identified Lata, not Large. Now remember, this is being written in 1943. This is long after the 20th.
Okay.
Waters of which formed an outlet to the southward by crossing a low divide to the head of Pine Creek, thence to Rock Lake. Remember, this is all Large talking to Hobbs about his original findings. Hobbs is basically saying, hey, I came up with this Lake Spokane, but I discovered you sort of came across it too. Tell me about it. And here's these outlets that Large is speaking of, this glacial Lake Spokane, draining through these two channels in the mountains south of Spokane, down California Creek into glacial Lake Lata, and thence backflowing up Hangman Creek, and at the low spot at elevation 2410, flowing down into Pine Creek, which then works its way down to Rock Lake, which is part of the Cheney-Palouse Channel Scablands, and then on its way down southwest. Now, this I love. He closes this long letter with a charming description of his retirement home. Now in my retirement, I've bought a little acreage for my garden, bees, and chickens. From the flat bottom of my Lake Spokane, much washed and scrubbed by its floods, with a rich mixture of black peaty soil with its surface of gravel, from which I can see the north and south abutments of the ice dam of my lake, and across the valley to the east and south, the low divide over which its diverted waters flowed.
Nice.
You gotta love it. This guy is just so descriptive. He's just so, it's just so enjoyable to read these letters. Now, Hobbs and Large are writing back forth several times in August and September. Now, a few disagreements that come to the surface. Hobbs is quite certain that the scabland deposits are from glacier, not floods, and he says so kind of emphatically in these different letters here. But of course, the presence of the scabland lobes changes things considerably. Along the stage route, the moraine is particularly well developed and is opened up in so-called gravel pits, which are really tills. Emphasizing what I wrote to you yesterday concerning gravel, I want to emphasize that a great deal of what is called gravel in the Scablands area is really till, glacier deposits. Ice has no capacity to produce layers, whereas water, even rapidly moving water, can produce stratification, at least imperfectly. So this is Hobbs, the professor, who's...
Exactly. There's condescension there. I think I hear. He's talking to this high school teachers. Listen up. This is what you got. I mean, come on, man.
Yeah, I think we'd call that geosplaining in today's... Okay, and then on 10th of September of 1943, Hobbs publishes his discovery. I love it. A discovery of an ice sheet extending all the way down to the Pasco Basin. I pulled this one off your website, Nick, because this is from that paper. This is not from the large collection. This is from that paper. But you can see his glacial Lake Spokane up here, and this big old lobe that's just completely plowing through the Scablands, and outletting down in Pasco. This was Hobbs' idea that he came up with in a month of field study. A month
of field study, and he's 79 years old.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
This idea was met by great skepticism, including both Bretz and Flint. They basically say, "Dude, what the heck?" Mm-hmm. Well, how does Bretz figure into this conversation? So, August 19th, 1943, right when Hobbs and Large are corresponding. Dear Large, the Hobbs investigation is looked on by several as somewhat of a farce. He has just completed a whole month of work, see the letter, and has in that time solved the Scabland problem. I gave him your title. I want to insert here. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Along with all the other problems, but he's nearly in his dotage and must have slipped. Huh. Gotta love it. Now, there's some other interesting bits. This is kind of interesting. Have you seen Pardee's paper? It's very interesting, but there is no mention of Scablands or of Bretz's idea of bursting Lake Missoula in it. I'll send you a copy if you want it. That's Pardee's, unusual occurrence, because that was published in 42.
Yes.
So it's interesting how these guys are still chatting, 20 years after the fact about this stuff. Large has definitely still got the oar in the water. Best regards, Bretz. Now, Large is still corresponding Hobbs, but he's updating Bretz. Dear Dr. Bretz, I'm enclosing to you a copy of a letter which I have sent to Hobbs. We've exchanged several letters in which he has been quite complimentary concerning my observations, but he is apparently determined to capture Lake Spokane from me and to squelch your Lake Lata by ignoring it. He holds that the Pine Creek outlet was 25,000 feet, not 2,400 feet, 2,500 feet, not 2,400 feet, because of a delta he discovered in the lake. He asked me to go and get from him some photos at Duncan, Pantops, Malden, and Pine City. Undoubtedly, Hobbs should recognize Till, I insert, because he's a famous glacial geologist. And if he finds it all around his hitherto unsuspecting lobe, his views may be accepted. He may force you into the discussion by playing Hob with your Scabland. So, Bretz was not the only one who had a turn of phrase.
Right.
Now, this exchange between Large and Hobbs gets testier here towards the end of December. Hobbs, I can see that if you can show as good evidence all the way around the lobe as is exposed in Pine City, you win. About the extension of Lake Spokane, I will be a good sport, but at present I'm finding a serious lot of leaks that will have to be plugged before my version of Lake Spokane and Bretz's version of Lake Lata have to be expunged. And the Pine Creek spillway will answer most of the points about the possibility of water doing the work Bretz claimed it did in the basalt of the Scablands.
Fascinating.
So he's basically saying, I'm not quite sure you got all your ducks in a row here, Hobbs. Now, there's also some other discussion that I didn't show here about Luss, but I really enjoyed this one from Hobbs going back to Large, saying, on one point I must take sharp issue with you. This is the origin of the Palouse soil. Your theory, the old one, falls down on the basis of distribution alone. However, a stronger argument I can bring from my experience in Greenland. I was the first to show, on definite grounds of observation, the origin of the loess, which is practically always associated with continental glaciation. Take that. Now, I think the theory that Large is describing is that most of the loess came from ashfall out of the Cascades, which I think we do know that Hobbs is actually right on this one. The
Yeah.
loess comes from glacial flour that then gets wind blown around and turns into these hills. But still, Hobbs basically once again geosplaining to Large about loess.
Yep.
It culminates in this exchange in December. It gets really hot. Large, I note also that you accept the theory of Bretz concerning the Spokane flood. I think you are quite alone in this, and I've gone over the literature pretty thoroughly and extensively and covered this in the early part of my forthcoming report. To which Large responds, yes, I do still believe that Dr. Bretz's explanation is the only one I know of which makes sense, and you are certainly very much mistaken if you think I'm alone in this belief. It's not necessary then for them, in other words, those others that believe this, to be vociferous concerning it, as mere reasonableness of Dr. Bretz in his many papers makes that unnecessary to anyone who has been in the field which he covers. The Washington bunch, after all of the ridicule which they poured on his theories, must still adhere to their half-baked ideas. You think someone else has a little bit of bitterness over 1927?
Yeah, totally.
Large is definitely carrying the torch for Bretz.
Yeah.
So, here comes the paper. December of 1943, Large publishes Confusion over Glacial Lake Spokane, posturing himself as an amateur with no reputation at stake. But he disputes a larger Lake Spokane based on the Pine Creek spillway elevation and declares no glaciation was present. Pine Creek is surrounded by loess. And he further uses Pine Creek as an example to bolster Bretz's scabland explanation. So he writes, Confusion over Glacial Lake Spokane. No small part of exploratory science has been the work of amateurs. In general, they have received generous treatment from professional researchers, though no doubt they are annoying at times. The amateur can sometimes function, figuratively speaking, as a navigator of a trial balloon. Having no reputation at stake, he may take a flyer into the field, which looks unpromising to a professional. It's not a very long paper, but these are just two excerpts that I really enjoyed. One sort of Large, sort of self-depreciating himself.
Yes.
Say, I'm just the amateur, but maybe I've got some things to say.
Yeah.
This North Pine Creek Valley is the easternmost of the many scabland channels. As there is in this channel no hint of glaciation, it offers a good check on the possible effects of torrential waters, which seems to be a stumbling block in Dr. Hobbs' acceptance of Dr. Bretz's explanation of the scablands. It is a miniature Grand Coulee. Interesting. A miniature Grand Coulee, you say? Let's take a look at that. Well, what do you know? Right here in Pine Creek, you can take a look at a little road that crosses it. Look at the size of the drainage here. Kind of puny. Look at that. Does that kind of look like a coulee to you, Nick?
It sure does.
Yeah. Now, what's also interesting about this is also the similar map that I did before from CalTopo, but I've turned on a geology layer, which I will say take with a great grain of salt.
Yeah.
But what this one does is that it shows where the exposed rock is the basalt and where you've got silt, sand, or gravel. And you can see all around Pine Creek, this is all loess. But Pine Creek itself, it's been scoured. It's all exposed basalt all the way out to the Cheney Scabland. So these guys were pretty observant. They knew what they saw. They could describe it really well. What was the response to Large's paper? Jody just sent this to me this last week, and I absolutely love this letter. Dear Professor Large, I was greatly interested in your note in the December 24 issue of Science. If necessary, I will be glad to come to your defense. Those of us familiar with the scabland problem will recognize your early and continued interest in the glacial history of the Spokane region. I hope you won't let the recent splash of Dr. Hobbs upset you too greatly. He has disregarded too many things. Several of us, including Bretz, are lying low for the time being. I understand that even Dr. Hobbs' financial sponsors are somewhat embarrassed by his undue haste and evident error. I think your interpretation of the situation in Spokane Valley and North Pine Creek Valley is sound, especially if yours envisions ice jams and not necessarily great torrents of open water, except now and then, and here and there, as the ice barriers failed. Sincerely yours, Ira S. Allison, Professor of Geology, Oregon State University on Corvallis. This is the same Allison back in the 20s who looked at Bretz and said, nah, no such. But look what he's saying here. Now, great torrents of open water now and then, and here and there as the ice barriers failed. Are we starting to see some cracks? Are we starting to see some of the ones that said, nah, looking at it and saying, well, maybe there was some big water. Okay, what's the aftermath of all this hoorah between Large, Hobbs, and Bretz? You would think that Large and Hobbs wouldn't have anything more to do with each other after 1943. However, Hobbs writes a note to Large on the 1st of October, 45, written on stationery from Webster's Hotel in Ellensburg, Nick.
There you go.
Asking to meet later that month in Spokane, and let's do several field trips together. And then in 47, Large writes to Hobbs, warmly congratulating him on his recent work, thanking Hobbs for recognizing Large's contribution to the glacial history of the Spokane region. Go figure.
Yeah.
You know, by 47, most every other geologist was saying, Hobbs, yeah, sorry. You know,
Right.
It's a fun idea, but nah, the evidence just simply doesn't support it. But yet, you know, Large and Hobbs were still corresponding with each other years later. As a postscript, these letters that we found in the Thomas Large collection, as far as we can tell, were the last letters written between Large and Bretz. Was in 1943. Thomas Large died 8 years later in 51, just before Bretz returned to the Scablands in 52. And you got to wonder, you know, if Large was alive in 52 and Bretz came out and the two of them got together, what would they have talked about?
Yes, right.
That's
Beautiful job. Really, John. That was so perfectly laid out. And I do recall over the course of the winter, every once in a while I'd hear from you like, you going to do that Hobbs stuff? I mean, there's good stuff on Hobbs, man. Can't you squeeze that in?
Well, I acknowledge that it wasn't really a main part of the narrative. And it really isn't. I mean, this Hobbs idea was very much a sideshow.
Yeah.
So I'm actually glad that you didn't include it. There was plenty of information to go over.
Yeah.
But I think the reason why I like sharing this story is that it shows how all of these little bits of information are out there. You know, I did discover that in reading these letters that there are letters that weren't in the collection that relate to this, relate to other things.
Yeah.
It's an imperfect story. It's an incomplete story. But yet, there's really interesting things that one can learn by just opening up these collections and reading what's there.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, John, if you could stop your share, let's just do a couple final thoughts here from everybody. I think Emily had to run to a meeting at 2 o'clock, so thanks again after the fact to Emily Moore, and she will email me some links to put at the bottom. So right down below this video, there'll be a bunch of links that are from Emily at the Special Collections, or I forget her moniker there, but at the collections on the campus of University of Oregon, and we'll make sure you know how to follow through on your own interest with researching. And I'm not sure if Lucy's still with us or if she had to run as well. There you are, Lucy. Lucy, can I ask you, was doing something like this totally unusual for you? Like, had you done any research with historical documents before, or you just happened to be watching a few episodes and you're like, I don't know if anybody else is going to do it. I don't know what I'm doing, but maybe I'll try at least to find a couple of things. Where are you on that spectrum, Lucy?
Lucy, you're muted.
Oh, yeah.
I saw the value of what they have to say. I think, we learn from our elders. So I respect that a lot. And I think that's the motivating factor for me, was to bring forth something that we can learn from them. And they were the first ones to lay eyes on that land. And what a beautiful description they did. They vested their lives on this work, and I think it merited to be brought forth to light. So and that's what's one of the things. And during the pandemic, I think it was that's when I got interested on doing that. You couldn't go out, you need something to take your mind away from the chaos that was at that time.
Yes.
So I thought that was really valuable to me to contribute to that in a little bit that we did, and it was really fun to meet the team. I got to meet John, and I told my granddaughter, I said, I just mean, I bet you anything that is John. And he's like, no. I said, I think that's John. And we haven't met. And I'm like, okay, we have 50% chance that that's John. And then as he was walking, we, getting closer. And like, okay, yes, man, it's 25% now. And until we get to the top of the stairs, and I see him going up the stairs. And I said, I'm 100% sure now. So when I met him, I'm like, I knew this was you, John.
Wow, yeah.
That was a fun day. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, and I was there when you found those letters, and you were so excited about it. You're like, oh my God, look at this.
Yeah.
It was
Lucy,
so interesting.
Yeah, Lucy, one more with you, if you don't mind me asking. Why did you involve your granddaughter? Was it you wanted to involve her in this, or you thought she was better at looking through documents than you were, or why did you have her involved? Yeah.
Well, for one, she needs to learn that we learn passing that I think belief that or the tradition that you respect your elders, you have to honor their legacy. You have to also be curious. You have to be part of the community, and you can learn there. And there's so much at the universities where you don't have to enroll in classes to learn. Education is available if you're willing to learn. And I told her, I said, you can only benefit by the example that is set forth for you. I said, look, everybody's donating their time to this. It is so important that we value that. And it's so gracious of you, Nick, to have this platform where we can learn without attending class at our own pace and their own, to our leisure, to whatever level of education you want to have it. So I really appreciate that. And so that's why I took her. And I said, you pay attention and you be grateful and you pass it on.
Well, thank you. I'm trying to keep it together now. That was very emotional. Thank you. Jody, final words from you. I think you deserve it. Let's go. Let's cap this whole thing off. Wherever you want to go.
Wherever I want to go, I wanted to really thank all those folks that showed up in response to you, and the fact that they, were glad that somebody was telling them what to do, and they did it with grace and honor. And I really enjoyed meeting everybody. And had a chance to visit. I'm one of those that was constant through, so I got to meet everybody.
Yes.
And everybody did contribute something, and every little bit counted in making it happen. So, and I'm glad that you asked us, and I'm glad that the Eugene team happened, and I'm very thankful that Sharon Seal found out that these were in the archive and gave us a chance to participate. So overall, I think it's a wonderful thing that you did, and I just love our Eugene team.
I do too.
It is now hereby disbanded, Nick.
Okay.
Except John will send you the files on that paper, because going through all of mine emails is bad. And seriously, if you want this, what do they call these thingies?
Little thumb drive? Yeah.
Yeah, if you want the thumb drive, it's easier to access than my emails.
Well, I think I've got it all. I had an organizational system there, so I think I've got everything. Thanks for the offer, but you guys you've done more than enough, and I have plenty to chew on. And yeah, my challenge now is in the next few weeks before I give these downtown lectures, just to figure out how much of Thomas Large I need to get into these 3 lectures. But obviously, he's a major character. Yeah,
that's why I'm coming.
You're coming
to see how you. Yeah, that's how, you got all these hours and hours, and I'm going, how is he going to get it down to 3 to 6 hours?
Good question. I don't think I know myself, but people will get a chance to meet some of you in person in Ellensburg in early April, so that's wonderful.
I'll have my Oregon jacket on. So.
Okay. All right. All right. Very good. John, anything to add before we quit?
No, I think that's great. I think you're going to have a big challenge in trying to how to whittle all this down.
Yeah.
In the 3 presentations.
Yeah. I am, but it's a fun challenge to have. Okay, you guys did a beautiful job with this. All 3 of you and Emily, who was with us for a solid hour. So thank you so much. I'm just going to end this right now, and we'll put this up later today, I think. So thank you, guys. Hope to meet all of you at some point. Thank you. Bye-bye.